Hey everyone. In this video, I want to discuss why you should never let anyone convince you that they'll change for you. This is something that a lot of people, more so manipulators, will try to do to keep a decent partner in their life. If they recognize that you're a good person, you're worth having around, or maybe even that you just benefit them in some way in their relationship, they will try to keep you around. Or even if they get comfortable with having you around and they can't stand their life not having you in the picture, they will try to keep you around. And so often you'll hear people say that they will change for you. But here's the thing, I'm convinced that like 99.99% of the time, people aren't able to do this successfully because it's a problem of motivation. And here's the thing, I've been working on myself for well over a decade at this point. I've been observing other people going down their own journeys in life and sometimes even choosing to work on themselves as well. And I've noticed people can't succeed on this journey of personal development without internal motivation. They just can't. What they'll end up often doing is pursuing personal growth for a while, and then they'll lose motivation and they'll stop and they'll go right back to the way they used to live before. This happens so freaking often, I would say it's basically the norm for most people, except maybe even, I'm almost at a point where I believe most people don't even ever consciously choose to work on themselves because you just don't see it much. You don't see the evidence of it. It's almost like most people just go through the motions. But that's a topic for another video. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because when someone tries to convince you that they'll change for you, they're lacking that internal motivation part of the equation, right? They're going to be motivated by you, an external factor. You're outside of them, right? So this is not internal motivation, and that means they can lose this form of motivation incredibly quickly because it's not coming from within them. So let's say you were to fall out of the picture. Immediately they'd probably stop working on themselves because now you're gone and you were the catalyst for them to work on themselves. Or let's say they succeed in convincing you to stay after agreeing to do X, Y, and Z for you or whatever it may be. Maybe you want them to start respecting your boundaries or something like that, and then they start working towards that. Well, what they'll often do is they'll obtain whatever it is, whatever qualifier you've set for them to allow yourself to jump back into the relationship with them, to stay with them. They'll attain that qualifier, and then once they've got you locked in again, they'll go right back to their old ways given enough time. This happens so freaking often, and it's no wonder, right? Because again, they are lacking internal motivation. They're not changing for themselves, they're changing for you. So this is why I would say you should never let anyone convince you that they'll change for you, because they're not going to. And even if they do, it's only going to be for a temporary period of time. Now I will throw in a caveat here, which is if you win the lottery and you're part of that 0.01%, maybe this can work. Maybe they can change for you and actually stick with it. But at some point, they're going to have to switch from being inspired by you to change to being inspired by themselves, to do it for themselves, to make their own life better. And that can happen, but it's rare because usually they're going to need to make that switch somehow, and maybe you could be the catalyst for it. But again, if you're watching my videos, you probably have a better chance of doing this than most people because it kind of requires inspiring them by your actions and whatnot and showing them what they could become, how great they could become, how they could make their life better and whatnot. And then maybe you could get them to actually derive that internal motivation on the personal development journey. But it's such a difficult thing for most people to do that I would say you should never bank on it. And if someone tries to tell you that they'll change for you, just hear that and translate it in your head to them saying, I'll do whatever it takes to keep you around, but once I have you again, I'm probably going to go back to my old ways, and then you're going to regret making that decision to choose me again because now you wasted all this time, and you may have met some great people during that time, but you were off limits because you went back to me, so you weren't able to pursue it with them, and now you've wasted time. So don't do it. Yeah, haven't seen any examples of this in my own life with people I've known where it's worked out. Occasionally you hear about stories where it may work out for one couple, but like I said, they're probably the equivalent of winning the lottery in this regard because it's just usually not going to happen. People do not change for others. They change because they want to become better themselves, which can be because they want to be a better person for the people they care about in their life, but not many of them will make that switch at some point. Usually you see this more often when someone has kids for the first time, where they choose to become better for their kids, because that's a very powerful motivator. But again, it's internal motivation. They're choosing to become better for their kids because they want to be a better parent for their kids. So in a way, their kids are the catalyst, but they're not like the source of their motivation. It's themselves wanting to be better for their kids. This is pretty much why I believe you should never let someone convince you that they'll change for you. It's super rare. It's not something you should bank on. I would never go back to someone because they were trying to tell me this. I would just say, hey, why weren't you already doing these things before you lost me? Right? There you go. That's the exact thing you want to be thinking. Why did it take losing you for them to finally decide to become better and to make the changes? If they cared about you enough, they would have been doing that from the very beginning and not letting you go and not taking you for granted. So, yeah, that's all there is to it. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. That's about the most I want to say on this subject. But I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. I'm curious to see whether or not you agree or disagree with me here. If you have examples of this actually working for someone, maybe it worked out in your own life. I'd be very curious to hear, because I just think that the vast majority of the time, people aren't going to change for someone else. They're not. They need to change for themselves. And sometimes the catalyst can be someone else, but in order for them to stay better, they have to be doing it for themselves. Otherwise, they're not going to be consistent with it. And at some point, they're going to revert back to how they used to be, because they'll stop consciously choosing to work on themselves. But yep, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Arrivederci!